Dear learners, today we have with us Dr. Mohammed Khalid, and we are going to learn about models and sustainable development, which is block one, block one of MSD 016. Sorry, block 4 of MSD 016, Unit 1 and 2. So we welcome you, Dr. Khalid. You can start your presentation.
Yes. I'll just share once again, 1 minute. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Audible.
Okay, fine. So as Rita Madam talked about, today I'm going to talk about models and sustainable development, which is part of your course MSD 016. And I will be covering unit 1 and 2. So I would like to start with this quote. Which is given by Paul Hawkins. Paul Hawkins is an American environmentalist. He is an entrepreneur and author of several books. So he says, I quote, "The first rule of sustainability is to align with natural forces, or at least not try to defy them," unquote. So this is what sustainability models are. These are different approaches and they show how we can achieve sustainability or sustainable development. That's what models do, and we'll talk about them. Paul Hawkins has also written The Ecology of Commerce. It's a very popular book among management graduates. So in today's counseling session, the outlines are as follows. I'll talk about what are models, the concept, what are its key components, and what types of models are there. Then we will particularly talk about sustainability models, which is the focus of today's lecture. There'll be several illustrations where you will understand what are some of the popular models, sustainability models, and some of the recent models for India also have covered 2, 3, just to illustrate you. And then we'll also talk about sustainable development in the Indian Himalayan region briefly, and the new development approach that is required in the region. And Niti Aayog has given a working paper recently, and they talk about a 5-area focus approach for the Indian Himalayan region, which I will talk about, and that will followed by the references and readings and question and answer session. So let's start with our first topic, that is models. So what is a model? This is a first question that comes to my mind. So very briefly, we can say that it's a simplified representation of reality. A model is something that conceptualizes the system. It gives some hint about what are the problems and issues. We are able to get some understanding of the problem and issues. Model can also help us in assessing priorities. It may also guide the implementation phase of the work. And we can also have models which evaluate the performance, say, of a project. We'll understand these things when I will give the examples. You will understand all these things easily. So for a model, there are 4 basic components. There is an output, there is an input, there's a scope of the model, and an application. So the output, that is the information we want to produce by the model, that could be easily understood. Input is the information, or say the data or anything that is required for the model. The scope is the applicability part of the model, that how applicable the model is, or it's just a theoretical model or just an idea. But it is also important whether it is applicable also. So when we do the application part, we actually explain the whole process, which we have conceptualized through the example. Now, the models can be of several types. As I was talking, conceptual model, it may be mathematical model, a spatial model. A spatial model, when I'm saying, it's talking particularly about the geoinformatics, the maps and all, cartograms and all, the models which involve these. That is what I mean by spatial model. Temporal models, I mean that whether they are static, whether they are dynamic, or something mix of it. So the focus of our lecture is sustainability models. So if we want to look at sustainability models, so we can group them into following categories, which can easily be understood. For example, it can be quantitative, which involves mathematics, statistics, database, some higher econometrics is involved, computer simulation is involved. For example, in an econometric model, there's a lot of data analysis math involved, and we hardly talk about general perspectives like local and global issues. So it is purely quantitative. Then we also can have models which are pictorial visualization models. For example, a model is simply represented in terms of a graph or a picture or a drawing or a Venn diagram. And the purpose here is to reach higher audience. So there's difference between each of the categories. Like quantitative models do not have that much of reach, that is very much specialized, and researchers and people in a particular domain understand those models. So, but a pictorial model has graphs, figures, so they have more reach. For example, for general audience. Then there are conceptual models which are based on theories. For example, population pressure and resource scarcity. Then there are standardized models which use indicators, benchmark values, and targets to evaluate the performance of a system. For example, the Niti Aayog does a lot of indicator-based work. For example, they have health performance report, they have water performance report for India. Then they have SDG index report for India, which assesses all the states and UTs of India based on certain number of indicators, and it is annually produced. Then we can also have physical models. It's a smaller or larger version of objects or system that allow visualization and further investigation. It is also, I will say, a bit of a specialized model for a limited audience like researchers, for example, urban planning and design. So this cannot be understood by a general layman. For a special group of people, experts, policymakers, they understand them. And it can also be used for recreation of habitats. For example, in Assam, we keep hearing that one-horn rhinoceros are killed for their horns, so the population has decreased several folds. So for this, we create a recreation habitat, and that can be based on a model. So there are several models. For birds like sparrow also, whose population is decreasing, we have now models. Now, let's start with the example part of the different models of sustainability. So one of the most popular and old, I will say one of the oldest one, is the three pillar model. In figure one, you can see there are three circles, and each one is environment part, social, and economy. So what we say in three pillar model, that it's an amalgamation of all three, or the intersection of all three components, and the sustainable development is said to be having all these three components. So you can say them dimensions of sustainability also. And this approach to sustainable development, the three pillar model, It is also called triple bottom line model. It's very popular in social sciences, economics, and we keep hearing about that in newspapers also. So one of the flaws there, so it's very popular, but still experts say that it has some flaws also, like it does cover basic aspects of human and society, but it doesn't talk about human quality of life. So today, that is a big question talked about globally, that we are talking about peace, we are talking about well-being. So as far as this simple basic model is concerned, it doesn't talk about quality of life. Even though we have a very popular index like Human Development Index, which is very popular, and the United Nations produces Human Development Report annually, but it is also criticized because it doesn't have any component for environment or well-being. Then there is also a fourth dimension, which is called institutional dimension. It was used widely by United Nations Commission for Sustainable Development, an international agency for atomic energy. But since it was very difficult to quantify the institutional dimension, they discontinued in 2005. So what we keep hearing is usually the three dimension, that is social, environment, and economic. Now we want to discuss the capital stock model. The capital stock model was given by the World Bank in 1994. They had a working group which came up with this idea, and the idea was, I would like to quote here: "We live only of the interest and not the capital. The basis of prosperity is maintained. However, if we consume the substance, our means of existence is in danger in the long run." So that was the basic idea when that group proposed this model. And they said that capital stock of sustainable development is actually summation of three stocks: capital stock of the environment, capital stock of the economy, and the capital stock of the society. However, this notion of a capital stock model was weak, and it was criticized by several ecological economists like Herman Daly, Lawn, and several others, because they said that it allows substitution of our different forms of capital. So when I say substitution, I mean that they said that the model made it possible that you can develop, you can grow, and you can substitute economic capital with environmental capital. That is, the development can happen at the cost of environment, and you don't care about that. So that is also the concept of weak sustainability. So the economists were of the notion that the environmental part is very critical. It must be kept intact in order to achieve sustainability. So this is the statement, what we can say is a statement that defines the strong sustainability concept. So this was also a conceptual model given, and it was not very popular. It was turned down immediately, and but yes, it is also one of the models that exist and reported in literature. Then there was another model called prism model, which Stenberg talked about. And if you look at the graph, I have two prisms, one at the top and bottom. I have categorized written A and B. The up, the top one is the prism of sustainable development, and the B is the main prism of sustainable development. You can again see that I was talking about institutional dimensions, so Stenberg includes the fourth dimension, and institutional dimension, you can say that is a social capital, the economic dimension is the man-made capital, environmental dimension, natural capital, you can say the natural resources, the the environmental services nature offers. Social dimension is the human capital. Human capital, you can say, the knowledge, the skills of the people. This is a human capital. So, in the PRISM's model of sustainable development, for each dimension, there were several indicators used to measure how far one has come in comparison to the overall vision of sustainable development. However, this was criticized by Keynes. Keynes says that the economic dimension tends to include assets emanating from all four dimensions, thus adding confusion to description and analysis. So, because of this, then Keynes gave another model, which is called the main prism of sustainable development. So, which can be illustrated as four dimension mind, institution, nature, artifact. And nature, you can say, is the environmental capital, artifact is the economic capital, mind is the social capital. And the idea here, what when Kane criticized the present model, the older model, he said the idea was to relieve the paradigm, relieve people from the burden of expressions like social and economic part. So instead of that, he used artifact, terms like artifact, mind, and the whole model, the prism model, the two prism models point out the impossibility, that is, man-made capital, social capital, and human capital can increase at the same time at the same amount. So it's not possible to increase all of them at the same time. And what is important is the interaction among all the four dimensions to achieve sustainable development. This was what PRISM model talks about. The next is the egg of sustainability model. So it was designed by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Uh, I just take 1 second, just 1 second, I'll back. Just give me 4 5 seconds. Sorry, it was interruption. So I was talking about the egg of sustainability model. So if you look at the right side, so the name as it suggests, egg of sustainability. So there's a figure that represents egg, and within that egg, you can see there's a smaller egg which is represented by people, and the larger one is the ecosystem. So this model particularly shows the relationship people have with the ecosystem, and the hypothesis of egg of sustainability model is that sustainable development is summation of human well-being and the economic system well-being. And also, if you look at the model, there are some flows shown. There's a flow that shows that there are stresses and benefits from the ecosystem to people. For example, there is a forest resource available, so people benefit from that. Forests provide sink. The trees observe carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And similarly, there are flows from the people to the ecosystem. For example, there can be stresses like people produce waste. For example, factories are producing waste and that is going into the rivers. So it's like a stress to the ecosystem. So it's happening both ways. There are some benefits and some stresses which ecosystem is putting up on humans, and similarly, the humans also put some stresses and benefits to the ecosystem back. This model was also criticized, and again, the notion was weak hypothesis. So, the critic says that it allows that sustainable development can occur if human well-being goes up or more than the ecosystem well-being falls. That is, development can happen at the cost of the environment, the weak sustainability concept. The equation also doesn't show humanity's well-being depends on ecosystem well-being and sustainable development as a whole. So these were the weakness of the egg and sustainability model. Now, these were the earlier models which I talked about were the old models. Now I'm talking about two models which talk about sustainable development for India. So the first one is the twin concept model, which was proposed by C-Step. C-Step is a Bangalore-based think tank, and they gave this model called twin concept model of sustainable development in the year 2011, and they conceptualized this model on the request of the Ministry of Environment and Forest. Mr. Jairam Ramesh was the environment minister that time. So in this model, what they said that the sustainable development is the intersection of sustainability and human development. And for each sustainability and human development, they devise some metrics. For example, for human development, they categorize it into six metric components: economic, food, water or sanitation, health, education, energy. And for each metric, they have designed some indicators. For example, for water and sanitation, uh, they have two indicators: percentage of population with home or immediately nearby access, or percentage of population with moderate sanitation available. Similarly, in the sustainability metrics, they had components like energy, environment, material. So, for example, in environment, they had two indicators like CO2 per capita and other gases like sulfur dioxide and NOx, etc., levels of it. So this was a conceptual model, and the weakness of this model was that it was also not taken up by the Ministry of Environment and Forest because it was just a conceptual idea and no illustration or practical application was shown by the think tank. Now, I'll talk about another model that was given for India. So this is called Sustainability Triangle Model. It was given by Von Hoff in the year 2011. Michael Von Hoff is an environmental ecologist, economist at University of Colorado in Germany. So he has done a lot of work on India, though he remains in Germany, but he has a lot of works, papers, and books published. In 2019, also, he has written a book on India on sustainability. So here he has also given a conceptual model of sustainability triangle where he has seven components of sustainability triangle. He has proposed, for example, there should be a natural basis of life, resource consumption. He talks about economic power, productivity of the society, populace, quality of life. As I was talking, the earlier models did not talk about quality of life, and it was one of the weaknesses of the older models like triple bottom line models, egg of sustainability model, and the prism model. And it also talks about social engagement. So there are seven dimensions in his model, and for each of his dimension, he was having a subfield of action. For example, for the natural basis of life, he was having subfields of actions, four subfields of action. One of them is biodiversity, environment, climate protection, and renewable energy. And for each of the subfield of action, again, they define indicators. It's like quality of surface water, air quality, nitrogen surplus, forest condition. So here also, in the initial slide, I was saying that a model can be of different types. So if we have to classify this model, so I will say this is a conceptual model. It's a model based on indicators. As we can see, there are different fields of action. Within each, there are different indicators also. So if this model would have been applicable, or this model was utilized, say somebody did research on an organization in India used the model, this triangle model given by Von Hoff, to access the sustainability of, say, some states of India or some region of India or some industry, then we could also have said that this model was not only conceptual, model based on indicators. We can say that it's also a practical model. And if this model utilized data over a period of time, say over 5, 10 years, so we can also say that it's a temporal model. And if this model also utilizes, say, graphs and GIS mapping and all, while discussing the sustainable triangle, we could also say that it is also having a special component. We can say it is also a special model. So as of now, this model was conceptual only, an indicator-based model. It was not applicable, neither it is temporal. So here, I come to end of the model component. So I talked about older models. Talked about two models for India, which are recent ones. And the next component of my talk was to discuss the sustainable development issues and agenda in the Indian Himalayan region. So here, if you look at the map, that says figure 6, you can see map of India. So this I have taken from Niti Aayog's report. And you can see that the top part, Jammu and Kashmir, are shown united. So, but in the recent maps, of course, we know that there are two union territories. That is, Jammu and Kashmir is separate, and Ladakh region is another part. However, this report belongs to Niti Aayog. So this figure is not mine. So I will apologize on that part if somebody has issue with that thing. So if you look at the figure, there are some regions which are in dark gray. And these are the states particularly which represent the Indian Himalayan region in India. So there are almost 13 states and UTs, and they cover almost 2,500 kilometers. There are states like Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim. Most of the northeastern states comprise the Indian Himalayan region like Mizoram, Meghalaya, Manipur, Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh. And almost the population residing in this region is around to the tune of 50 million, we can say. So now these are hilly regions, they have some characteristics. These are not the regions like plains. And these are characterized by, I will say, three components. Uh, these are inaccessible. We all know that hilly terrain is difficult terrain. It's not easy to travel, transport in this region. So this is what I mean by inaccessible. Then the fragile ecosystem. So there's a lot of vegetation nature has bestowed them, but at the same time, this is very fragile, very sensitive to changes in environmental conditions. We keep hearing about landslides. We keep hearing about high rocks falling. Then there are flash floods, which we heard in Uttarakhand happened, which killed so many. people. And also another characteristics of mountain region is that population is not uniform. So you'll find that in a cluster, after some kilometer, there are a group of communities living. Then there is land, all empty land, grassland or valleys. Then another cluster there is living. So there are marginal communities living in and which are spread over across the region. So that's how the mountain regions are characterized. They are inaccessible, they are fragile, they have marginal communities. And also the development path in this region is very different. It's not like rest of India in the plains how development happens. And these regions are not easy regions, they are difficult terrains. Nature also is not in favor of these regions, and they have their own issues, which is very different to the rest of the country, for example. And the development which is happening in that country also poses a threat in these regions. For example, there is uncontrolled demand-driven economic growth, which is happening in the country. And this has led to haphazard urbanization, environmental degradation in these regions. There are a lot of risk and vulnerabilities. I was talking about floods, landslides. These are common in these regions. And because this is a difficult terrain, there's a lot of issues. So people also keep migrating. In hilly region, there is a large population which, in search of employment, keeps migrating. Some part of the year they are in that part. If the employment is, then they move to another part. So they keep migrating. So that is also one of the characteristics of the hilly region. And the way development is happening, so the whole social cultural fabric is also being eroded. So so the main idea I want to highlight is that these regions need a very different model, which is unlike the rest of the country. So we'll talk about one of the approaches that recently Niti Aayog has done in one of their reports. So, which is what I call the new development approach, that traditional development model won't work in these regions. And these are untenable because mountains require specific solutions. And also, that model has to be in sync with the SDGs. We are talking about a solution, we are talking about a development pathway that is sustainable also. So if you look at figure 7, that shows 5 thematic area of focus. This is one of the approaches recently Niti Aayog has adopted for the development of Indian Himalayan region. So if you look at the dots, the 4 circles, so they have and one at the bottom that makes 5 circles and that makes 5 thematic areas of focus. So they are talking about a spring revival program. Springs are very crucial for water supply in Himalayan region. They are talking about skill and entrepreneurship development in the region, how we can do that. They're talking about shifting cultivation uh, and a transformation approach, and they're talking about sustainable and responsible tourism. Tourism is one of the main, uh, you can say, main activities that drives economies of these hill regions. And then they are talking about database development, that we also need to have a very robust data in these regions to drive development. And overall, the result is we are having a pathway towards sustainable development of the Indian Himalayan states. We'll discuss each of these 5 thematic areas, so where we will understand the problem and what they are trying to do. For example, I was talking that one of the thematic areas is inventory and revival of springs in the Himalayas. So water is a very crucial resource for the Himalayan region, and I will say for the rest of the India also, because many of the glaciers originate in these, many of the rivers originate from these states like Uttarakhand and Himachal. There are glaciers, which are the source of water for several regions around the year. So, Shimla, that's a capital of Himachal Pradesh. There are a lot of research and recent evidences which show that the springs are drying in Shimla, and it is estimated that some 2040s, around 2040s, the Shimla will run out of water. And it is one of the examples I'm giving from one of the Himalayan states. There are several other examples. So for that, they did some research and they found that the existing watersheds in the region, in the Himalayan states, they don't include aquifers. So, as a solution, what they have proposed is that there's a need to combine the watershed with aquifers to form a spring shed. And this will solve the water issue in the Himalayan states. Another thing they propose is that we need to use science to the maximum. So they want to use hydrogeology to identify the recharge areas of the spring. Then they also talk about community approaches to spring management. For example, in several areas like in state Sikkim, a northeastern state, a tiny state, they have a program like Dhara Vikas. So for spring management, and community is involved in that. So using science, combining the watershed with aquifers, and using knowledge, traditional knowledge of the community, they say that we can revive springs, which will be lasting, and that's how we can solve problem of water security in the Indian Himalayan region. Then second component is sustainable tourism in the Indian Himalayan region. IHR, I am writing as Indian Himalayan region. So now the problem that is existing in the region because of I was talking about the traditional development model, that there is unsustainable tourism. There's a lot of pressure in these states because these states are also the states where people travel for pleasure and for scenic beauty and for religious purposes also. And there are a lot of tourists going. Those say there's a the city can accommodate say a lakh population, then the people going is more than 2-3 times of that population. So that is what is high pressure, I mean. And the terrain is difficult. There are poor roads, infrastructure is not appropriate, and there is also ecological degradation because of the unsustainable construction happening. There is a lot of ecological degradation. There are dams are also being built, highways being built, so that is also destroying the natural flora and fauna of the region, and which is also dangerous. I was talking about the construction. A lot of landslides are not the result of nature. That is not a natural phenomena. That is also a result of the bad infrastructure projects developed by man, humans, that has resulted in a lot of landslides also in recent years. There's a lot of pollution waste problem. There's not adequate waste management. The cultural fabric is being eroded. So as a solution, what they have recommended is that there should be an environmental audit. There should be an assessment of carrying capacity of the region. Carrying capacity, I talked about in my earlier region, that every region has a particular capacity, and if we go beyond the capacity, then actually we are eroding that system. So we need to also measure the carbon foot of the regions. So we do not have numbers. We need to do that assignment. Then they also propose that doing something that also requires finance. Maybe the states do not have enough finance with them. So one of the solution could be, it's not a main solution, but it could be something that will help the existing financial condition, that put up a charge or a fee, which they call a cess on, and this charge is being taken to maintain the place, the region, managing the services, and developing and implementing tourism sector standards like hospitality, developing the human resources and skill development and all. And in that name, we are charging a fee, and several places in the world are doing that. So in India, also, we should start doing that. And in fact, some of the states, like the state like Sikkim, has already started to charge a sustainable development fee. Then they also say that the development approach we need to follow, that should be community or participatory. It should not be that multinational firms and private firms are coming up and the local people are not getting any role in that. So the sharing should be fair and it should be equitable. Then they also talk about that there is also a need to maintain the local culture and ecosystem services. It's not just that what is in the waste we need to copy that development model or the construction infra. So each place have something to offer which is indigenous, which is local, and they propose like something like village homestage, orchard visits. There should be harbor treatment and medicinal centers, and government should popularize them. Government should invite local peoples to start these village homestays and organize orchard visits. There should be public-private partnership. There should be arts and crafts centers, mountain horticultural shops. They should be developed and there should be training for that. Third important component is skill and entrepreneurship development. If you look at the figures that are not very healthy for India, and they are even poorer for Indian Himalayan region, only 4.69% of the total workforce has gone some sort of formal skill training in India. These are figures I am giving you for 2016. This is also from the Niti Aayog report I have taken. And this figure is even bad for Indian Himalayan region, that not even stands at 2%. But if you look at the nations, the development world, these figures are huge. For example, in the US, 52% people have gone formal skill training, 68% in the UK, 3/4 in Germany, almost 80% in Japan, and 96% in South Korea. So if we match these figures, we stand nowhere. And one of the common complaints which foreign tourists, when they go to Indian Himalayan region, they give that we do not have people who are trained and for everything, like hospitality also they are not satisfied, and neither in other aspect like people who will they go for renting hotels, when they go they accompany some common man who can show them their place. They are also not a skill, so they are not satisfied, they are not happy with this stay. So there is need for a lot of formal skill training also in this region. There's inadequacy of training centers in regions, lack of quality accessors and trainers. There's low awareness levels. I was telling you that there's a problem of migration in these regions a lot. This is also one of the reasons that many people don't stay. Once they are trained, they go away. There's low awareness levels, limited local demand also, because the development model is not such that there is participation and public-private partnership is there. We are promoting the local community also and involving them in projects. And the economies of scale is also low in these regions. That is also the reason that investments are low. So they have identified some priority areas for these skill entrepreneurship development. For example, agri entrepreneurship. in mountain products like herbs, medicine, health food, off-season vegetables. Sustainable mountain tourism should be there, and skill and development should be there. Ecosystem-based employment opportunities, IT surveys, skill training programs. So these are the areas where they propose that we should have a skill and entrepreneurship development. Then they also want to develop cadre for trainers and network skill centers where they are integrating vocational training with schools and college education. That is also required. Then there's need to train the migrant workers also. It's not just the local people, but also the people who are migrant because there's large population which is migratory. And last, public-private partnership, they say that there should be firms which should offer short-term apprenticeship to people who are going for trainings. Fourth is the shifting cultivation. So large forest cover loss is reported in northeastern region because of this practice of shift cultivation. We do not have data on shift cultivation practice, so they are proposing agricultural transformation, landscape and system approach for planning. One of the first things they recommend is that there should be update of data. That is, what is the area under cultivation or how much area is not under that is fallow. They want to promote home gardens and income generating crops in these regions. Entrepreneurship opportunity for these shift cultivators. There should be land zoning. There should be tenurial security. And also to support the finances, they said that there should be amendment to credit guidelines that allows group guarantee. Initially, there was only village or clan authorities who gave guarantee. Now they want that there should be group guarantee for loans instead of land title deeds in shifting cultivation areas. Lastly, all these four programs, they said this requires data for informed decision making, and for that they propose that there should be a comprehensive database in the Indian Himalayan region, which is authentic, accessible, publicly available data is there. There is a accreditation agency, central accreditation agency for the Indian Himalayan region. For example, there is already a GBPAN, National Institute of Himalayan Environment and Sustainable Development in Uttarakhand. So institute like this can be the accreditation agency for IHR, and there should be data sharing and monitoring to state agencies and central agencies. That there should be collaboration also. Now, these five thematic areas or the approach which I talked about, it's not going to happen so easily. Apart from this, they require several things. For example, there should be high level of collaboration among the institution at different levels. For example, among the ministries, departments, institutions, commissions, the experts, the trainers. There should also be awareness and capacity building, several campaign, media, and collaborative programs with support from Ministry of Environment and Forest. There should be network of training and incubation centers, research and technology that requires hydrogeological understanding, product development specific to mountain regions, new ideas and innovation in carrying capacity, standards for certification of tourism products. Then we also need finance. And for this, one of the things could be convergence of existing schemes and programs, incentives for sustainable practices, something like I already talked about CES, some call it green CES or tax, access to institutional finance through programs like Skill India, Startup India, Mudra program. Like Mudra, for example, in Mudra program, the government of India provides a loan of say rupees 10 lakhs to non-corporate works, non-farm works. Then Government can create a green climate fund for Indian Himalayan region, support such activities. And all this also requires a policy environment that informs the ongoing policy process, that strengthens the regional dimension. There are commissions for new assessments, and there are framework policy guidelines issued regularly by this commission and the state government. And that coupled with effective implementation and monitoring, if you're able to work on these aspects, it is said that the five focus area would be a huge success in the Indian Himalayan region. So I think with this, I would like to end today's counseling session. These are the references I have used, and these are some of the readings I have suggested, which gives you a very good idea about the models of sustainable development and some of the issues and problems and strategies for the Indian Himalayan region. So that's all. I'm now open for the questions. Hello.
Yeah,
Gita
Dr.
madam.
Khalid.
Yeah, so we can have the questions.
Yeah, just a minute.